Hey there. Thanks so much, Bob, for being on. I'll let you introduce yourself. Let's kick off. If you could, give me a bit of an overview of, who you are and what you've been working on.
Absolutely, yeah. My name is Bob Elwell. I'm a senior director of engineering at the Constant Company, which is the parent company for Vultr, the cloud platform. And I've been there about 6 months. Came in from a company called User Testing, where I was a director of the platform foundations team, which is kind of foundational DevOps and sort of service delivery there for about 3 years. So over the last 6 months, I've been working to help scale out the team and kind of take some approaches to modernize and grow our core capabilities as a platform to service a broader and more sophisticated range of customers.
Very cool. Anything sort of else that you'd want to share? Sort of interesting stuff that you've built in the past, or any projects you've worked on that you sort of want to highlight? Could be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things, and kind of more and more germane to my new role here at Vultr was I had a while ago worked as the sort of search architect for Wikia, which is now known as Fandom, and having about 10% of your millions of page views a month really be driven by the search feature. It was one of those kinds of things where they had serious like performance and relevance problems, and building out a new solution that introduced some better approaches to back end like processing and indexing and improving the overall performance was a lot of fun, a big highlight early on in my career as I was learning about how things worked in tech.
Very cool. So maybe tell us a little bit about Vultr and what you guys are, what the product is, what it does, what you love about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vultr is an independent cloud platform. So when we talk about the cloud, there's the joke that there is no such thing as the cloud. It's just other people's computers, right? But there are various nuances to that. When you look at what folks refer to as the big three, which would be like AWS, Azure, GCP, right? You're looking at some very like kind of highly sophisticated software solutions that handle a lot of like super challenging enterprise requirements, and that's kind of the barrier to entry, right? In order to get practically anything advanced working in those environments, you need to have a really strong like cloud native understanding of the tooling that they offer. I always bring up like AWS IAM, right? Like I can't get a Kubernetes cluster running in EKS unless I really, know everything going on about execution roles and all that kind of stuff, right? Whereas for some of these more independent cloud providers with a focus more on empowering kind of smaller developer shops that don't have to worry about as many call it like enterprise concerns like SSO, auditability, cost centering, all that kind of stuff. You're able to more trivially interact with our instances. It's you can go everywhere from I need a VPS in a certain location so that I can run a web server to even I want a more trivial Kubernetes cluster to allow me to run my workloads. So we offer kind of the whole gamut of both self-managed and managed functionality, bare metal, which is not super duper common in the space. And one of the things that I'm, kind of particularly proud of with this company is our amazing kind of deployment and sysadmin groups, which have helped us to grow to nearly 30 locations. So we've got a big footprint and looking to make it even bigger.
Very cool. So your team at Vultr, how's your team structured? How many people do you manage? How's your team organized?
Yeah, absolutely. So the engineering team at Vultr, it's comprised of 6 teams that I essentially would say, are sort of arranged like a pyramid, I put it. We have an internal platform team as the very base of the pyramid, and they're doing a lot of the work around configuration management, supporting the actual like hosts that do a lot of the virtualization work that results in the instances that our customers work with, right? And a lot of the kind of uh, deep down APIs and scripting sort of things that ideally a customer would have no idea is going on, right? Then we've got the customer platform, which sits directly on top of the internal platform, and they are offering from that platform the actual platform that our customers use. And yeah, that's a lot of the term platform in the same sentence. It's, kind of because of what we do, right? But the customer platform focuses on things like accounts and billing, provisioning of virtual and bare metal instances, and networking products. So I basically say, when it comes to anything that you can SSH into that we offer in order to access it, those are the things that the customer platform supports. So everything from I've got to sign up and get a credit card going to I want to ask for this instance in this data center and then SSH into it. Then we've got a few more teams, cloud native, CDN, storage. Those are all, kind of sitting on top of the customer platform. And those are instances and functionalities that are built on top of our customer platform, but that provide more abstracted functionality that, you wouldn't expect to SSH into these instances, right? You've got load balancers, Kubernetes clusters, CDN in the works, and then of course our object and block storage. And of course, all of these things are working together to create the ecosystem that we provide. At the very tippy top, the experience team, which is helping to build out the UI, not just for our customers, but also for like internal customers with back office solutions, building out a design toolkit and helping us to really communicate our overall look and feel outside of, like a basic console and into even things such as our like www site or blogs and things of that nature. So I personally have within my organization about 30 people, handful of managers managing some of those folks, but largely a pretty flat organization. So that's, I think, one of the artifacts of where the company has started. We've definitely probably doubled in the last year, and we're looking to continue to grow through 2023. So we'll expect to become more and more sophisticated as time goes by.
Nice. So what about any sort of challenges you've come across in terms of scaling your engineering team? Anything you want to share in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the bigger challenges on scaling a team, especially when you're looking at, roughly around a dozen people growing into that next dozen, growing up to that first 50, you have to change your mindset from this is a problem that so-and-so does to this is a problem within this domain, right? So it's very natural to group teams together by people and the things that they often work on together. But as time goes by and as companies become responsible for doing more stuff, there is a need to have a better separation of concerns between who's doing what and what teams are doing what. This is really important because it helps avoid both like single threading one person as a stream of work for a particular project, but also that a single expert problem, right? Where the lottery ticket factor, right? What if this person doesn't have a reason to show up to work the next day, right? You need to make sure that a whole team can be capable for handling a particular service, a particular area of the code. And so being able to delegate or delineate those responsibilities to a team as opposed to a person is the way that you start doing it. What becomes difficult then, of course, is identifying all of those things that a particular person has historically been responsible for, and then trying to find kind of the shared threads, right? And teasing those out in a meaningful way to help group responsibilities together according to kind of how a team may be able to best service them.
Very cool. And what about sort of, tips and sort of experiences you've had in terms of hiring, what also with terms of what you're looking for in a developer or an engineer, or, different people that you're adding to your team. What are you sort of looking for, when it comes to, obviously there's soft skills, cultural fit, personality, things like that. And also how do you sort of, check for people's, technical capabilities and things like that? Sort of like, what are you looking for, and what tips do you have in terms of hiring?
Sure. So as far as hiring goes, that's always a challenge, right? Because you're trying to solve a really multifaceted problem. There's of course does this person have the skills that we need to satisfy the role? There's also, is this person going to be successful, not just in our engineering culture, but also in sort of the way that the company gets things done, right? Some of the things that I usually recommend to like companies that know they're going to be doing a lot of hiring and maybe even going as far as like doubling the amount of people in the company, things like that, is really to have a plan on what not just your company values as like core values, but also what your organization values, because those become really important compasses, not just for like identifying the right people to bring into your organization, but to retain the essence of what's made you successful in the past. There is, of course, that well-known saying, book title, in fact, what got you here won't get you there. When you're looking to grow, being able to tease out the things that are like really at your essence versus the things that were, temporarily helpful in making you successful is also very important. So, I think one thing to call out is like if a company is looking to move up market, if a company is looking to increase its overall quality, right? You might not be looking for, folks who, for instance, consider themselves like hackers and like to get things done fast, right? You might want to be looking for people who enter into new engineering projects like with a clear planning phase and an understanding of key performance indicators and metrics and things like that. That's not to say that either one of those kinds of engineers aren't like great to have on a particular team, but depending on sort of what your goals are, you might be, preferential to one over the other.
Yeah, that totally
So
makes sense.
personally, yeah, so personally I look for, engineers who are capable of kind of dealing with ambiguity, right? People who are comfortable creating order out of chaos wherever they go, because that's where we are right now at Vultr. We're in a transitional period where we're starting to take a lot of the things that we were just kind of able to do off the cuff and operationalize them a lot better and make it so that more and more people can get it done so that we can do more things at once, right? So having folks who are comfortable sort of on both sides of both like get it done but have a plan, that's the sort of people that we look for.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about on paper or on a resume when you're looking at people's previous companies they've worked at or their education background, sort of degrees? How important is that for you when you're hiring?
So it varies. I think that a degree can be really important important if you're early on in your career. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if you don't have one, but you've got great experience all your life with software, that you shouldn't also be considered. One of the things that I in particular love about where I work is that we've got a really good history of promoting from within, from our sysadmin organization into engineering. We've got a lot of people in very key roles, came from, non-traditional or, non-college backgrounds even, who have, gone as far as like director level roles here at Vultr because of the impact that they made over time. And I think that that's really important, is to create those paths and to put an emphasis on developing the folks within your organization. That being said, I think with or without, like, for instance, college education, there is, a set of accomplishments, things that a person has gotten done in the area that I'm hiring for that I'd like to see if I'm trying to bring somebody in at like a mid-level or senior or staff role, right?
Yeah.
And that's not just years of experience; it's magnitude of accomplishment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So moving on to sort of more the product side of things, one of the things that, from my experience is a huge motivator for, engineers and engineering managers is not just, you know, building stuff, but it's also the satisfaction of getting something out into the hands of users. And, have you sort of got any stories or experiences you'd like to share about a time where you, pushed out a feature or pushed out a product and you got that, got to experience that feeling of getting into the hands of users, getting some traction or something along those lines?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, because I've of course worked on sort of consumer facing products in the past, but I've got to tell you, maybe it's just because they're the people that I work with, but as a person who's spent more time as like a platform engineer, the most satisfaction I get is when I've pushed out functionality that helps the other engineers in the company be more productive, right? It's always so satisfying, like even when you just like push out a little like chatbot functionality or some kind of a new dashboard that makes it easy to figure out the state of a bunch of services at once, how much more that helps people kind of stay focused on the work that they're doing, right? It's one of those like amplifying factors. They talk about 10x engineers. It's not that you're doing 10 times as much stuff as a normal engineer. It's that you're, making 5 more engineers twice as productive. So that's the kind of product that I like to roll out, right?
Wow, that's so cool. So what about tools and processes, sort of their tools that love to use, something that you couldn't imagine, not using in your team, any sort of tool that came along that was a game changer for productivity in sort of how you get things done in your engineering team?
Yeah, so I'd say VS Code, surprisingly, right? Like, especially over the last several years, there's, of course, always been a lot of IDEs and, within terminal editors and things like that. But the market share that VS Code's taken on, the great, like, community of extensions, and just the ability to say, like, okay, I'm going to assume that 80% of the engineers here are using VS Code. So, like, if you're happy to figure it out for yourself in Vim or Emacs or Sublime, awesome. But, if I spend like X amount of time helping people get set up consistently with VS Code, they'll all be able to run tests in their editor and stuff like that. That's a pretty big game changer.
Wow, that's nice. So I think one of the big things that comes up a lot on people that we're speaking to it through engineer.at is, there are some developers who are considering if they want to move into engineering management. Some of them, there are obviously a bunch that don't want to necessarily move into that role and they're very happy to move into more senior engineering roles. What would be sort of your message to someone who was considering moving, into engineering management and how to make that decision? About whether or not it would make sense or not.
So, move into engineering is into engineering management. It's often something that you feel like you've got to do in order to progress your career. I would really strongly challenge you to rethink that paradigm if you're working someplace where that's your only path to career growth. Then I think that says a little bit more about the organization than your future, right? It's very important to create parallel tracks for high performing, really thoughtful individual contributors to continue to grow their career without having to worry about taking on reports, without having to worry about, for instance, like having like compensation discussions, hiring, things like that. What I will say to anybody who wants to progress their career one way or the other is that whether or not you want to be a manager, somebody who works at a staff or principal or architect level will need to have like a basic set of soft skills because there's going to be increasing cross-organization discussions, right, with stakeholders who are not necessarily as technical. There's also the need, of course, for you as a more senior person in the organization to be able to mentor others, to help grow the careers of others. And just because they're not your report doesn't mean that you shouldn't feel a sense of responsibility for the growth of the folks behind you, right? Think about somebody who helped you get to where you are now, right? It's more than likely at least one person who wasn't your boss helped you learn something really important. That's kind of one of the things to keep in mind there. That being said, if you want to make the sort of move from an individual contributor to a manager, there's a bunch of things that you can start doing ahead of time to build up some of those skills that are really important in your new role. Because just because you're good at coding doesn't mean you're going to be a good manager, right? It's a totally different set of skills. Some people have to go to school for it. Personally, I read a ton of books on leadership, a ton of books on management, and got involved in a lot of, what I would consider extracurriculars, right? Trying to run interest groups within an organization, trying to get engaged in like cross-team projects so that you're mixing it up with a bunch of different people outside of your team. The network effect is incredibly important. As a manager, you need to know who to talk to get things done, not just within your overarching organization, but across your organization, and often even with like vendors, for instance, depending on how much you depend on vendors at your job. So it's a lot about knowing how to talk with people and knowing how to appeal to the right economy for a particular person, right? Everybody's an individual and they're all motivated by different things. And the best way to help folks get stuff done is to get to know them and get to know what they want.
That is awesome. I mean, it definitely seems, the deeper that we go into this topic, that it's a completely different set of skills. I think it makes sense to come from that engineering background, but there's so many more skills around hiring, managing people, mentoring, and all of those other cross-company and vendor management things that people might not even think about. But yeah, that was great insight. I really appreciate that. I suppose my question to you is, any other sort of final things you want to share, any other sort of fun stuff that, you'd want to share, anything else you've learned along the way, all your years of experience?
I'd say the most important thing is to just remember that as we become a more remote friendly industry, that, equal parts remote and friendly. right? It's so easy to forget that all of the folks that you work with are also people on the other side of that computer. So it really pays off big time to remember that we're all kind of working on the same stuff together, and that we've all got a vested interest in each other's success. And that's the way you help teams move forward.
Wow, that is awesome. So Bob, thanks so much. Really appreciate you taking the time today. Chat.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yossi.